I find the tree by accident on a wet Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the world stops acting normal. I am out in protected woodland with a state subcontract crew list in a plastic sleeve under my truck visor, replacing rotted handrail sections along an old trail loop that almost nobody uses anymore. The official job is simple: pull bad lumber, set new posts, leave the place looking untouched. I work alone that day because the rest of the crew is down at the visitor center rebuilding a split rail fence. I take the longer route back to my truck to avoid a washout on the marked path, and that is when I see the root flare rising out of the slope ahead of me. Wide, twisted, covered in moss, half hidden behind mountain laurel and deadfall. At first, I think it is a boulder with roots crawling over it. Then I get closer and see bark, gray and furrowed and old enough to hold dirt in the cracks. The trunk is enormous. I cannot get both arms halfway around it. One side of it is blackened high up where lightning hit it years ago, and another side has a split that runs down toward the base. The canopy is still alive. New leaf buds sit on the upper limbs. The thing is damaged, but it is not dead. It is standing in a little bowl of ground between two ridges where the wind barely reaches. There is no marked trail near it, no sign tag, no foot traffic, nothing. I stand there with my hammer loop hanging off my belt and stare at the opening near the base. It is not obvious from 10 feet away. Roots curl around it. A shelf of old leaf litter hides the lower edge. From where I am, it looks too narrow to mean much. Then I kneel and push aside fern stems and damp sticks and find a hollow behind the roots, deep enough that my arm disappears to the shoulder. Most people would report it. That is the correct thing to do in protected woodland. Old growth tree with internal damage, possible hazard, possible rare habitat. Call it in and let the forestry people fence it off and make notes and maybe cut access to the whole area. I know that. I also know what happens after that. Bright tape goes up. Crews come in. Somebody posts coordinates online. Curious hikers show up. A thing that stayed hidden for 100 years gets turned into a weekend destination for every bored person within driving distance. I get on my knees and crawl inside. The hollow widens fast. Cool, dry air meets me first. Then the smell of old wood, mineral dirt, a little rot low down where rain must have seeped years ago and dried again. I angle my shoulders through and pull myself into a chamber taller than I expected. I can crouch without my head touching bark. If I lean to one side, I can almost stand. There is a natural shelf where the inner wood burned out long ago, and above it the trunk tapers into darkness. Tiny shafts of daylight come through old insect channels and dead branch scars. Not enough to expose the cavity from outside, just enough to show shape. The inside wall is hard around the edges and dry where it matters. I stay in there longer than I should. I run my hand over the shell and feel thickness. The living layer is outward. The dead center is gone. Somebody from a university could probably explain all of it better than I can. I do not need the lecture. I know wood. I know load paths and pressure, and what has held through 50 winters has earned respect. I also know when a space feels wrong in a useful way. The cavity is high enough off the low ground that runoff does not pool. The laurel around it blocks sight from a distance. The slope behind it gives natural cover. There is an old service road somewhere west of here, half swallowed by brush. If a man wanted to disappear for a night or two, he could. I back out. Put the ferns where they were, and mark nothing. On the drive home, I tell myself it is just a good storm shelter, nothing more. A carpenter notices hidden space, that is all. I have spent enough years framing cabins, fixing storm damage, and crawling under structures to know I always think in shelter and repair. It does not mean anything. It does not mean I plan to break rules on public land. It definitely does not mean I am going to turn an ancient tree into a private bunker. By Thursday evening, I am back there with a tape measure, a headlamp wrapped in red cellophane, a notebook, and a folding saw. I park off a gravel pull-off that nobody uses after dark. I carry everything in under a contractor trash bag so it looks from a distance as if I am hauling out litter. I count steps from a broken sandstone marker to a crooked beech tree, then from the beech to the hollow. Inside, I take rough measurements. Interior width at the base, a little over 5 feet. Better space on the north side. Charred channel rises upward, possible vent route if I can keep weather out. Existing opening low at the roots. Too visible if a person gets close, but workable. I sketch a frame that never touches the living bark with metal fasteners. Pressure fit only. Pads at contact points. Lightweight cedar. Nothing that screams new construction. I tell myself one more time that I am only planning. A plan is not a project. By Sunday, I am pricing cedar offcuts and narrow hardware at a salvage yard in the next county where nobody knows me. The first week goes fast. I keep my regular work. I show up on site every morning. I joke with the other guys. I eat gas station sandwiches in the truck. Then after hours, I drive back toward the forest with one bundle at a time. Thin boards, rubber pads cut from horse stall mat, a pair of old marine hatch latches, lightweight shelving brackets I end up not using because they rattle, mesh screen, a compact pry bar, cord, brown canvas, 2 food-grade water containers. Nothing huge, never enough to look strange if a cop peers in the bed. I build slow because hidden work punishes hurry. The first thing I make is not a bed or a shelf. It is the entrance. The natural opening under the roots is too exposed from a crouched angle, so I widen the inside only, never the outside. I build a shallow hatch frame from cedar ripped thin enough to pass in pieces through the gap. I pad the edges with weather stripping and fit it behind a mat of root fibers, bark scrap, forest duff, and moss lifted in one sheet from a nearby fallen log. From outside, once the panel is closed, it looks like nothing but packed debris settled between roots. From inside, if I pull a recessed strap, the panel folds inward and down just enough for me to crawl through. Then I work on airflow. People imagine hidden shelters with candles and camp stoves and all kinds of nonsense. A small closed space turns bad fast. I know that from crawl spaces and storm shelters. I do not plan to cook inside this tree. I do not plan to burn anything in it. I run a narrow vent through an old, dead limb channel that already exits high on the trunk. I line the interior opening with mesh and dark cloth so no light slips out. Outside, the top looks like a broken knothole packed with natural debris. It moves enough air if the wind is even half awake. The sleeping platform takes me 3 evenings because I refuse to drill into the live shell. I pressure fit 2 vertical posts against reinforced deadwood inside the cavity, bridge them with cross pieces, and float a narrow bunk high enough to keep supplies dry underneath. It is not comfortable. It does not need to be. I make it just wide enough for me to lie flat on one side with a blanket roll, a pad, and space to turn carefully. Anything bigger wastes room. Anything bigger makes noise. I add a shelf by the shoulder level on the right wall, notebook, batteries, radio, flashlight, water filter, folding knife, gloves. Under the bunk, I strap down food bins and canvas sleeves so nothing clinks. One slot for canned goods, one for dry rice and oats in sealed bags, one for first aid, one for tools. I bring in a small chemical toilet bag system, use it once as a test, hate it immediately, and decide all waste stays outside in buried pits well away from the tree. Smell gets a man killed in a hidden space. After the first rain, I go back at dawn and crawl in to check for leaks. None. There is some dampness low on the rear floor where old rot meets dirt, so I lay a removable grate there out of cedar strips and leave a charcoal bag near it to pull moisture. I sit on the bunk in the quiet and listen to drops hitting leaves far above the canopy. The tree does not move much. That surprises me. Big trunks carry wind differently from cabins. There is no loose siding, no ridge cap, no gutter slap. Just a deep, slow shift in the wood now and then, more felt through the soles of my boots than heard. A man can think too clearly in a place that quiet. I start adding to it because I enjoy the work, and because I do not trust the normal reasons I keep giving myself. I say it is for storms. I say it is because hidden carpentry scratches the same part of my brain that puzzles and lockboxes do. I say it is because I spend too much time around loud people and rotting structures, and I want one thing in my life built the way I want it. All of that is true. None of it is the whole truth. The whole truth is that I have been watching small, wrong things pile up for months. Shortages that make no sense. Deliveries delayed with vague excuses. One county clinic closing 2 wings for deep cleaning and then reopening with hired security in the parking lot. Animal control trucks on roads where animal control never goes. A local school dismissing for a maintenance issue and staying shut for 4 days without any visible work. A friend of mine who drives refrigerated freight says he keeps getting rerouted around hospitals and county warehouses at night. He laughs when he tells it, but he also says he has never seen that many marked state vehicles outside cold storage buildings before. Chakra, I am not a conspiracy man. I am not the guy in the diner mumbling over coffee and pointing at clouds. I build things. I fix things. I notice patterns because loose patterns turn into broken structures. That is the job. If 5 joists are cracked in the same direction, a man does not call it coincidence and keep walking. He looks for load, water, or movement, so I keep building. I cache work clothes in a sealed bag inside the tree, spare socks, thermal layer, rain shell, water purification tablets, a pry bar wrapped in tape, 2 backup lighters in a waterproof bottle even though I have no intention of using open flame inside, a small hand drill, needle and thread, protein bars, peanut butter, jerky, salt, ibuprofen, antibiotic ointment, gauze, duct tape rolled flat around an old gift card, a laminated county map cut down to the useful section, a cheap pair of binoculars, 1 old revolver with 6 rounds in it and 12 more sealed in oilcloth, buried in a separate spot 40 yards away, because I do not want metal weight and desperation living in the same hole unless it has to. I do not tell anybody. I almost stop after the 2nd week. The shelter is functional by then, hidden enough, dry enough. If I were normal, that would be the end of it. Instead, I improve details nobody will ever see. I line one interior wall with dark felt to kill accidental sound from buckles and tool handles. I weave a brush screen outside one sightline so I can look downhill through a slit no wider than a finger without catching light on my face. I shift the hatch pull lower because the first position forces my elbow into the shelf. I carry out every shaving, every offcut, every screw I decide not to use. Then the first public warning comes. It hits the radio on a Friday while I am replacing deck boards on an overlook platform. Regional advisory. Avoid unnecessary travel in 3 counties south of us. Law enforcement activity related to a violent public health incident. More updates to follow. The wording is wrong. Too polished in some spots. Too vague in the places that matter. One of the younger guys on the crew laughs and says somebody finally lost it in a Walmart. The foreman tells him to keep working. 15 minutes later, the foreman gets a call, walks off to take it, and comes back looking older than he did before. He says we are shutting down early. That afternoon, I stop for fuel and see 3 sheriff cruisers at the gas station across from the pump islands. One deputy is holding a paper mask over his mouth. Another is yelling at a woman sitting on the curb with blood on one sleeve. The blood does not look heavy enough to explain the way everybody near her is backing off. A man by the air pump has his phone up, filming. The deputy knocks it out of his hand. That gets my attention more than the blood. I do not stare long. I fill the truck and leave. The next 2 days I spend money faster than I have in years. Water containers, canned food, rice, dried beans, a hand crank radio, bleach for cleaning gear, not the foolish stuff people say about infection, batteries, fuel, tarps, extra socks, line, hooks, a small hatchet, handsaw blades, coffee, powdered milk, painkillers, vitamin tablets, instant soup, jerky, more water filter elements, coffee again, because if the world is going to get worse, I am not doing it without coffee. I buy from different places, cash where I can, I spread it out. Nobody questions a carpenter loading supplies into a work truck during storm season. By Sunday afternoon, the stores are wrong. Shelves are not empty yet. But the shape of shopping changes. People are not browsing. Nobody is leaning on carts and comparing brands. Men are carrying cases instead of single items. Women are moving fast and not looking up. A kid cries in aisle 9 because his mother yanks him away from a coughing man who cannot stop wiping his mouth with his sleeve. Near the register, a woman says her sister works at the county hospital and something is happening in the locked ward. The cashier tells her to stop talking like that in front of people. Outside in the parking lot, I hear 2 pops from somewhere past the pharmacy block. Fireworks, somebody says. Nobody believes it. I do one more supply run that evening for things I forgot the first time because men always forget the same things when they stock for trouble. Dish soap, trash bags, extra toilet paper, nail clippers, more socks. A manual can opener because relying on one built into a pocket tool is how a stupid problem turns serious. I leave town after dark with the truck bed packed under a tarp and an ugly feeling sitting with me on the drive. At home, I do not unpack. I sleep in work clothes on top of the blanket and wake before sunrise to sirens. By 8 in the morning, there is video everywhere. Bad angles, shaky phones, people screaming, a highway checkpoint, 2 men fighting with paramedics in a strip mall lot, a woman in a hospital gown running barefoot through traffic. Official statements arrive every hour and explain nothing. Temporary closures, public safety event, localized violence, misinformation warning, stay calm, stay indoors, await guidance. It all sounds like language trying to get ahead of reality and failing. I call my brother 2 states over. He tells me the news there is still calling it a cluster of assaults tied to contaminated drugs. I tell him to fill his tank and keep food in the house. He asks if I am overreacting. I tell him maybe. He says he will call me later. He never does. At 10:30 I drive. I do not head straight to the tree. That would leave tracks in a place too close to roads people might start using. First, I go to a storage unit I rent under my business name and strip out everything useful: tool bags, fasteners, a folding shovel, rope, extra battery packs, cold weather layers, spare boots. Then I stop by a machine shed on a property where I did repairs last winter. The owner is in Florida and will not be back for months. I left an old mountain bike there after fixing a gate. I take the bike, leave a note inside the shed, and load it in the truck. On the road toward the forest, traffic is already pulling itself apart. The main lanes heading south are clogged with people trying to leave one mess and driving toward another. Northbound moves, but not clean. I pass a minivan on the shoulder with all 4 doors open and nobody near it. I pass 2 ambulances with no sirens, just lights, sliding fast through gaps. At one intersection, a pickup has jumped the curb and hit a bus stop hard enough to bend the shelter frame. There is blood on the glass. A man in office clothes is standing in the middle of the crosswalk, staring at nothing while cars swing around him. At the last gas station before the county line, I stop because I want every drop I can carry. The lot is chaos, horns, shouting, one pump ripped halfway off its base. I leave the truck running and fill from a side pump while keeping my eyes up. Near the store entrance, a heavy man in a green polo is on the ground with one shoe missing. Another man is trying to drag him by the belt. A store clerk comes out with a fire extinguisher and sprays white cloud into a knot of people at the door. Somebody starts yelling that one of them bit him. The word cuts through the whole lot. Bit. I cap the fuel, throw the nozzle down, and leave. By the time I hit the forest access road, I am done pretending this is going to smooth out in a few days. The gate to the maintenance lane is chained, but I have worked enough state jobs to know old service routes nobody remembers. I turn off on a washed gravel spur half a mile back, bump through brush, and make it to the abandoned skid road west of the hollow. I drive until the ruts get too tight for the truck. Then I back under hemlock cover, throw a camouflage tarp over the cab, scatter branches on the hood, unload the bike, and start packing in supplies. That first trip almost breaks me for pure stupidity. I have packed plenty of job sites. I know how to distribute weight. None of that matters when a man tries to move half his life into a tree in one afternoon because he waited too long to believe trouble was real. I hump 2 water containers, food bags, tool roll, blankets, and the radio on the first trip, and by the time I get to the laurel wall near the hollow, I am moving slow enough to notice every snapped twig underfoot. Slow is dangerous when time matters. Fast is dangerous when noise matters. I dump the load in cover, go back, and force myself into a rhythm instead of panic. Trip after trip, truck to tree, tree to truck, bike leaned in brush, sweat drying on my back, and then starting again. By the 4th run, I begin hearing distant sounds from the highway through the ridge gap. Not steady traffic, bursts of horns, then nothing, then a long stretch of sirens. Once, somewhere farther out, I hear gunfire. Not many rounds. Enough. Late afternoon. I finish. Inside the tree, the shelter I built for weather and private nerves suddenly looks too small for what it is meant to do. Gear fills the floor under the bunk. Water takes most of one side. Food bins stack tight. I tuck the radio on the shelf and crack the vent. Then I crawl back out and spend another hour destroying my own approach signs. Brush pulled back into place. Loose dirt fluffed with a branch. Footprints brushed. A few false tracks angled away downhill. I bury one food cache near a dead stump 50 yards east. Another near a rock seam above the creek. At dusk, I drag one more load to the truck. Not toward the tree this time, but away from it. I leave an old cooler, a torn sleeping bag, and a crate with worthless hardware near a visible deer camp site a quarter-mile off. If somebody comes through later, I want him to believe the obvious hiding place has already been used by a fool. By the time darkness settles under the canopy, I am inside the trunk with the hatch sealed and the first real silence of the outbreak around me. It is not peaceful. The forest absorbs distant sound and hands back only pieces. A siren reaches me, then drops away. A helicopter passes somewhere south, blades beating through cloud. Farther off, dogs bark, then stop all at once. The radio gives me fragments because reception under the shell is weak. Stay inside. Avoid contact. Emergency services are overwhelmed. National Guard units are deploying. A county commissioner starts speaking and gets cut off, then static. I do not sleep much that first night. Every little creak in the wood sounds newly important because now my life is inside it. I sit with my back against the inner wall and look through one sight slit at a slice of darkness and fern shapes. Something moves past around midnight. I hear leaf litter press down. Slow, uncertain, one step, stop, another step. Not deer. Deer move cleaner. This is a person or a sick animal. The shape never comes into the slit. It circles downhill and fades. Near dawn, rain starts. I listen to it hit the canopy and count slow until my own thoughts stop running ahead. Morning under the tree is gray and tight. The inside air still feels good. No leak, no smell. I open the hatch a fraction and watch the slope. Nothing. For breakfast, I eat cold oats mixed in a metal cup with water and powdered milk, then half a protein bar because I make myself ration from the start. That is one thing fear does not get to control. Food math is food math. By noon, I see the first person. He comes through the trees from the southwest. One man, late 40s maybe, hunting jacket, baseball cap, backpack hanging half open. He is moving too fast for the ground and not looking where he places his feet. He slips twice and catches himself on saplings. Every few yards he turns and looks back over his shoulder, not with the sharp scan of a woodsman, more with the blind need of a man who expects something behind him and does not know what it is. He passes within 20 feet of the tree. If he looks down at the root flare and kneels, he might see the edge of the camo mat. He does not. He keeps moving, stops by a beach to drink from a plastic bottle, spits, then stumbles on. 10 minutes later, another figure comes from the same direction. A woman. She is younger, mud to the knees, no pack, one sneaker untied. She is not following his exact line. She is weaving. She calls out once, not loud, asks for Tyler. The name carries through wet leaves and gets swallowed. She does not sound sick. She sounds tired and angry and close to crying. I stay still. She stops maybe 30 feet downhill from me and bends over with hands on her thighs. Then she straightens, wipes her face, and keeps going north. I never see either of them again. That afternoon, I make my first rule change. No unnecessary movement outside the tree during full daylight. Until then, I had pictured quick supply runs, water trips, maybe even small improvements to the hide. That idea dies watching those two pass. The forest is now carrying traffic I cannot predict. Lost people, fleeing people, sick people, armed people eventually. My advantage is that nobody knows I exist. Every choice has to protect that. So I settle into a routine. Wake at first light. Listen before moving. Check airflow, small breakfast. Watch downhill through the slit. Write notes in the notebook. Mid-morning. Silence work inside only. Repack bins. Rotate batteries. Inspect straps. Midday. Radio check under a blanket to muffle any accidental noise. Afternoon. Rest with one boot on in case I need to move fast. Dusk. Water run if needed. Night. Short sleep in pieces. On the second evening, the first infected reaches the tree. I hear it before I see it, a dragging scuff through damp leaves and occasional contact with low branches. The sound comes from uphill where the laurel thickens. At first, I think it is a wounded hiker. Then the figure pushes through into my view line, and all the pieces refuse to fit together. It is a woman in a dark sweatshirt. One sleeve is gone from shoulder to elbow. There is dried brown on the shirt front and one side of her neck. She is upright, but not in any purposeful way. Her head keeps drifting off-center as she moves, then jerking back. One shoe is missing. Her bare foot lands on sticks and rock, and she never reacts. She stops 6 feet from the trunk. I do not move. Her face turns toward the bark. Not toward the hatch exactly, just the trunk. She places one hand on it and stands there. The fingers slide down in a slow scratch. Bark flakes drop. Then she leans her forehead against the outer shell and stays still long enough that I think maybe she has given out. A squirrel bursts from a branch over her head. She whips around and lurches after the sound. That is the first time I understand what these things are doing out here. Not hunting in any clever sense. Reacting. Pulling toward movement and noise and whatever catches the ruined part of a mind that still turns a body. The woman crashes through brush downhill and disappears. Minutes later, I hear something heavy fall. Then quiet. I sit in the dark, with my hand on the revolver buried under the bunk, and decide I am not leaving the tree that night even though my water can is low. By the third day, the radio admits more than it did before. There is an infectious event. That phrase again. Civil emergency. Travel restrictions, multiple counties. Shelter in place if safe shelter is available. Avoid all physical contact with symptomatic persons. Symptomatic now means fever, aggression, confusion, loss of pain response, severe disorientation. Nobody says dead. Nobody says reanimated. I never hear that word. I do hear one exhausted doctor on a local call-in relay say the patients are not surviving ordinary trauma and are continuing activity beyond expected limits. The host cuts him off. Later, the station is gone. In the afternoon, I hear voices close enough that I flatten on the bunk. A family of 3 comes into the bowl from the east. Man. Woman. Boy around 10 or 11. The man carries a duffel and a shotgun. The woman has 2 backpacks clipped together and keeps telling the boy to stay near. The boy is whining that he is tired and wet and wants to stop. The man says they stop here for 1 hour only. He sounds angry in the way scared men do when they think anger is keeping them useful. They choose the ground 15 feet from my tree. Of all the forest around them, all the ridges and hollows and deadfall cover, they choose the one patch of ground I can see from both sightlines. The man drops the duffel, scans the slope, and says this spot is hidden enough. He is not wrong. He is also close enough that if he leans back against the trunk, he will feel a shape that is too regular under the root mass. I stay perfectly still while they unpack. They do not build a real camp. Too tired for that. Too scared, maybe. The woman hands the boy crackers. The man paces once in a circle, checks the shotgun, then sits with his back against a rock facing downhill. The boy asks if Grandpa is coming. Nobody answers for a while. Then the woman says Grandpa could not keep up. Her voice is flat and used up. I spend the next hour thinking through impossible choices. If I reveal myself, I risk the shelter. If I do not, I let strangers stay within arm's reach of the only safe place I have. If one of them is sick, I am caged with it by my own silence. I watch the man because he is the one most likely to find the hatch by accident. He never leans on the tree. He keeps rubbing one forearm, though. And once I see the woman look at that arm and then look away fast, I cannot tell if there is blood under his jacket or if my eyes are inventing trouble. Dusk comes. They are still there. The woman wants to move. The man says not until dark fully settles. The boy falls asleep curled against a pack. I hear them opening canned food. The smell of it reaches even through bark and damp earth. That worries me more than the voices. Smell drifts. Smell lingers. Then the man starts breathing in hard little pulls and trying not to show it. I can hear it through the shell. Not fear. Effort. His voice goes rough. The woman asks what is wrong. He says nothing. She asks again. He snaps at her. 5 minutes later, he drops the spoon he is holding and stares at his own hand as if it belongs to somebody else. The woman tells the boy to wake up and put his shoes on. Fast. Her voice changes. No panic in it now. Just decision. The man stands too quickly and almost falls into the duffel. He says something ugly I cannot make out. The woman backs away with the boy behind her. She has the shotgun now. I never see her take it from him. The man takes one step toward them, then another. He looks wrong already. Too loose in the face. Mouth hanging open. She tells him to stop. He does not. The gun goes off once. Inside the tree, the blast turns the whole shell into a drum. Bark dust shakes loose above me. Birds explode out of the canopy. The man drops, kicks, tries to get back up. And the woman does not wait to see more. She grabs the boy and both packs and runs. I stay in place with my ears ringing. Out on the slope, the man rolls to his knees. That is the moment I lose the last bit of normal thinking I brought into the woods. I know what a shotgun does at close range. I know what that fall should mean. He rises anyway, not cleanly, not well, enough. He turns his head with slow animal confusion and starts after the direction the woman went. He leaves the duffel and the spilled food by my tree and crashes downhill in the dark. The forest goes still again. I do not open the hatch for 2 hours. When I finally crawl out, it is black under the canopy and rain has started again. I move low, flashlight off, hand on the bark to orient myself. The abandoned duffel is still there. So is the spoon. So are 3 cans, a tarp, and a half-full box of shells. I drag everything into brush and listen. No return, no voices. Nothing but water coming down through leaves. I should leave the gear. I do not. I carry the shells and tarp back first, then the food. The duffel has clothes, a family photo in a side pocket, a cheap fixed blade knife, and 2 bottles of water. I keep the useful things and bury the photo under a flat stone well away from the tree. It feels wrong to bring it inside. The next morning, there are tracks everywhere around the bowl. The boy's small soles, the woman's hard-running line, the man's staggered pursuit, and from sometime in the night, after the gunshot, 2 more shambling sets that crossed the area and wandered on. Noise brought them. If the family had stayed longer, more would have followed. That locks the next rule into place. No gunfire near the tree if there is any other option. Days start stacking. I move only when the light is poor or rain is falling hard enough to cover sound. I fill water from a spring seep uphill instead of the creek below because the creek channel is becoming a travel corridor for both people and infected. I see them from my slit more often now. Not huge numbers, 1 here, 2 there. A man in business clothes with no shoes. An older woman with one arm hanging limp, walking circles until she catches on a stump and stays there half the day. A teenage boy limping with both hands out in front of him for no reason I can read. Once I see a cluster of 4 move together downhill toward the sound of distant shouting. They bump into saplings, into each other, into brush, but keep going. Humans are worse. The first armed group passes on day 6. 3 men with hunting rifles and loaded packs. They move with purpose and keep spacing between them. Not refugees, not lost hikers. One of them has a radio clipped to his vest. Another carries bolt cutters. They do not speak much. The lead man stops once and kneels to inspect tracks near the old service road. He points north. The others go that way. I do not breathe until long after the sound of their boots is gone. That night I move the buried revolver cache closer. The work nearly gets me seen. I am digging by feel under a waxed tarp at the base of a dead stump when headlamps flicker through trees below. I flatten against the ground and kill my own light. 2 beams sweep the understory. Men talking low. Not the same armed group. These sound younger. One is out of breath. One keeps saying he heard something up here. They come within 50 yards and stop near the creek. I hear splashing, bottles filling, a cough. Then one of them says he wants to head back before dark gets worse because there are things moving near the road. Things. That is what people call the infected now, when they cannot handle giving them any part of the human back. After the headlamps fade, I finish digging with my hands and carry the revolver into the tree under my shirt. I wrap the metal in a rag to keep it from touching the shelf and making even the smallest sound. 1 week in, my whole world is reduced to tiny choices. How much water to drink before the next fill? Whether coffee is worth the smell? Which bootlace knot unties the quietest? How long a man can hold still before his knee starts arguing and how to shift without the bunk creaking? Whether to trust one radio station over another? Whether the thump I heard at noon came from a falling branch or a body? It sounds small. It is not. That is what survival in a hidden space becomes. Not hero work. Not speeches. Not charging into danger to prove a point. It is 100 petty decisions made with discipline while the bigger world tears itself apart outside bark and moss. On day 9, the first real human temptation arrives. I spot smoke in the afternoon through the west slit. Not much. Thin and controlled. Camp smoke. Somebody is sitting not far off and believes it is safe enough to cook. I watch until I can place the source. Small ravine west of the bowl. Good concealment. Bad escape routes. Whoever chose it knows enough to stay off open ground, but not enough to understand how scent and light carry in timber. At dusk I crawl out and make a loop wide around the ravine. I should not. Curiosity is stupid. So is ignoring nearby people you may need to avoid later. I tell myself it is reconnaissance. The truth is, I want human answers. Maybe a radio with clearer news. Maybe word of whether roads are open anywhere. Maybe just another sane voice proving the species is not finished. I belly up behind a rotting log and look down. It is one woman, maybe early 30s, alone, wrapped in a rain poncho with a little stove going under a flat rock shelf. She has a pack, a hatchet, and a limp on the left side. Hair tied back. No visible blood. She eats from a small pot and keeps checking uphill. Good habits. There is a map weighted on a stump beside her. I cannot see enough to read it. I stay there longer than I should. Part of me wants to reveal myself, quietly, hands visible, trade information. Maybe join movement with another person instead of rotting in a tree waiting for chance to decide everything. Then the woman takes off the poncho and I see a dark bandage around her upper arm. Not good enough. Could be clean wound. Could be branch cut. Could be anything. In this world, anything is too much risk. I back away without making contact. Near midnight, I hear her leave. In the morning, the camp is gone except for a coffee packet wrapper and one boot print where she slipped in mud. I pocket the wrapper because foil catches light and because I cannot stand leaving anything that says a person was there without knowing where that person went. Day 10 brings rain hard enough to keep most movement down, and with it a problem I did not predict well enough. Water runs under the root flare. Not flooding, not yet. But enough seep sneaks beneath the hatch edge to damp the interior mat and one corner of the floor grate. I catch it early. Still, fixing it means outside work in miserable conditions, while visibility is low and footing is bad. I strip down to rain shell and gloves, crawl out in gray noon light, and dig a shallow diversion trench with the folding shovel using motions no larger than necessary. Mud fills my cuffs. Water runs cold through the trench and away downhill. Then I lift the camo panel, dry the seal, pack fresh moss around the outer lip, and add a secondary drip edge from bark strips and waxed cloth under the root fringe. Every second of that repair, I feel exposed. The forest in rain is loud, but it is also close. Shapes appear late. Sound direction gets muddy. Twice I freeze because I think I hear steps over the hiss of water. Once it is only runoff hitting a hollow log. Once it is real. A figure moves through the trees below. One infected. Male. Plaid shirt hanging open. Head down. He drifts toward the sound of my digging. I press into the root wall with one hand on the hatch edge and the shovel held flat against my leg. He comes within maybe 12 feet, stops, and turns his face my way. I do not move. Rain pours off the brim of my hood into my eyes. The infected stands there, listening in whatever ruined way he can, then tilts toward a branch snapping farther downhill and goes after that instead. I finish the repair in half the time and get back inside covered in mud but dry where it counts. That night I drink instant coffee cold and call it a victory. After that storm, the woods change. Ground gets softer, tracks hold longer, smells rise. Rot moves fast where rainwater pooled. The old service road becomes a line of churned prints and tire marks from small off-road vehicles. Somebody has figured out the forest is a useful bypass around blocked highways and bad towns. That means more traffic, more chance, more eyes. I stop using the west approach entirely and start entering the bowl from uphill through rock and laurel where tracks break up better. My notebook fills. I log times, directions, number of infected seen, number of humans, weather, noises at night. It gives shape to the days. It also shows me something I do not want to see. Human movement is trending closer. Not always to the tree, but closer to the bowl. The spring uphill helps. Cover helps. The old service road helps. Good hiding terrain attracts people who know what they are doing. On day 12, I go farther than I should for supplies. A ranger maintenance shed sits nearly 2 miles north near a firebreak line. I know it from contract work 2 summers ago. Metal structure, usually locked, sometimes stocked with hand tools, fuel cans, and lime for trail maintenance. I leave before dawn with an empty pack and the bike hidden near the first rise. Riding would be noisy in the bowl, but pushing it on old roadbed saves time later. The forest is gray and cold and full of little fresh sounds that keep making me stop. The shed is still standing. The lock is gone. Inside, chaos. Somebody already hit it. Shelves knocked over. Empty first aid box, missing chainsaws. Fuel cans gone. Still useful, though. I find work gloves, handsaw blades, a coil of wire, 2 rolls of survey tape I leave because bright colors have no place in my life now. Packets of drink mix, 1/2 box of nails, ratchet straps, and, hidden behind lime bags, a sealed case of trail meals meant for seasonal crews. Bland, dense, perfect. While I am loading the pack, I hear an engine, small, high whine. Not a truck, a TV maybe. I kill my light and slip to the rear of the shed just before 2 men ride up on a quad. One heavy, one thin, both carrying long guns across their backs. They dismount and walk in through the open front. From my spot against the back wall, I hear them kick debris and curse about getting beat to the good stuff. One says there are cabins farther east. The other says cabins mean owners. Owners mean problems. Then the heavy one laughs and says, owners are not much of a problem anymore if a man gets there first. That laugh changes the rest of my day. Up to then, I have mostly been avoiding danger. Those 2 remind me danger is starting to organize. Men adapt fast when law and shame stop leaning on them. Forests fill with the people who know how to move, and the people who learn by hurting softer targets. I stay hidden until they leave. On the ride back, pushing the bike over slick leaves with the loaded pack pulling on my shoulders, I hear one single rifle shot somewhere far southeast, then another. Not panicked, deliberate. Hunting or execution. Out here, it barely matters which. I start caching less at the tree after that. More goes into dispersed hides. The tree is my sleeping place, my blind, my emergency shell. It cannot also be the entire future. On day 14, I almost die because of a can opener. I am kidding myself if I say it was the can opener. It was exhaustion. It was routine turning soft at the edges. I am inside the tree at midday opening beans with too much impatience because I skipped breakfast and spent dawn moving one supply cache. The opener slips, the can rolls, and metal taps cedar shelf with a sharp, clean click. Tiny sound. Inside the tree, it feels huge. 10 seconds later, I hear movement outside that was already there and just beyond my notice. Quick steps, a pause, then a voice. You hear that? Male, close. Another voice answers from farther off that it was probably a bird. The first one says no, it came from right here. I go still with the can in one hand and the revolver in the other. Boots crunch around the bowl. 2 men. Maybe the same pair from the quad. Maybe not. One comes so close I hear fabric brush fern stems. He stops near the trunk. I can picture him looking at the base, looking at the roots, maybe seeing nothing but bark and moss. Then his boot thumps the outer shell. The whole inside hums. He says, "Big old thing." The other man tells him to quit fooling around and check downhill because he found cigarette butts near the creek. They move off after another minute. I stay frozen until my legs hurt. Then I put the beans away, and do not touch food again until dark. From then on, I wrap every metal thing in cloth. A couple of days later, I find proof that somebody has started using the Lower Creek Bend as a camp rotation point. Not a full camp, too dangerous, just a staging area. Boot prints, one torn food wrapper, a piss spot under a rhododendron, char on a flat rock where a small fire sat. More worrying than all that, dog tracks. That changes everything. A dog does not care how clever my camo hatch looks. A dog cares about food, human scent, and hidden heat. If men with a dog start quartering the forest, the tree becomes a coffin, unless I have a way to redirect that animal. I spend the next night building noise lures. Old trick from job sites where you want raccoons or nosy kids away from tools. Nothing fancy. Fishing line, lightweight tins. One small bag of jerky grease rubbed on bark far from the hide. Another scent trail pulled downhill toward a hollow log stuffed with food wrapper scraps. If a dog comes close, I want competing attractions layered away from the trunk. Not guaranteed. Better than prayer. On day 17, the dog arrives. I hear men first. 3 of them moving uphill from the creek with the rough, low talk of people who are not worried about being overheard because they think fear belongs to other people. Then the jingle. Collar metal. Nails on stone. I slide down from the bunk and crouch by the hatch with the revolver tucked in my waistband and the hatchet in hand, because close work inside a tree is not gun work unless I have no choice. The dog comes into view through the slit. Hound mix, ribs showing, gray muzzle, nose busy. One man holds the leash loose. Another has a scoped rifle. The third carries a pack frame with bedrolls tied on. They are not just passing through. They are searching. The dog pulls toward the creek scent first. Good. One man swears and tugs it back. They sweep uphill. 10 yards, 8, 6. My mouth goes dry and useless. The dog stops beside the rock where I planted jerky grease 2 nights ago. It snuffles hard, paws once, and drags that direction. The handler laughs and says the mutt found old meat. He lets it investigate for half a minute. Then the dog lifts its head and turns toward the tree. I grip the hatchet handle until my hand aches. The leash goes tight. The dog leans. The handler braces and tells it easy. It whines once. One man says there might be another camp up here. The rifleman starts walking toward my trunk. From downhill comes a sudden crash of tins. Not my doing in that moment. Wind, maybe. Or one of the hanging lines finally slipping under wet weight. I do not care why. The dog lunges toward the noise. Hard. Leash rips from the handler's hand. The hound barrels downhill barking with full voice, straight toward the scent trail and hollow log lure. All 3 men curse and run after it. I stay where I am, stunned by how close that came. The barking grows louder downhill, then changes pitch, sharp, frantic. Then men shouting. Then 2 rifle shots almost back to back, infected. The dog or the noise or all of it has stirred something near the creek camp line. More shouting now. Boots crashing. One man yelling to get back. Then one long stretch of silence after the echoes die. Nobody returns uphill for the rest of the day. At dusk, I crawl out and circle wide to inspect. Blood on leaves near the hollow log. Not much. Torn fabric. One dropped canteen. Dog tracks vanishing north at speed. Tracks from at least 3 infected converging from the lower thicket. Human prints leaving in a hurry. No bodies. Good enough? I take the canteen, erase what sign I can, and spend an hour relocating my nearest scent lures, because now men have been too close, and chance will not save me twice. That night the tree feels smaller than ever. For the first time since I hid there, I consider abandoning it. The thought sits with me while I chew dry trail meal and listen to static. Maybe the better move is deeper country, higher elevation, less foot traffic. Maybe keep moving every 2 days and stop trusting one place. Mobility is life in a lot of bad situations. I know that. I also know mobility burns calories, increases exposure, and puts me back into open decisions every waking hour. The tree has one unbeatable quality: invisibility. Not perfect. Better than any cabin, shed, or tent I am likely to find. So I stay, but I start planning the day I may have to leave fast. I bundle an exit pack under the bunk. Food for 3 days. Filter, map, shells, knife, socks, tape, small tarp, medical kit. Nothing sentimental, nothing heavy enough to slow me if I have to crawl out and run, because smoke, men, or a fallen trunk turns this shelter from advantage into trap. Day 19 begins with crows making a racket over the lower slope. Crows mean carcass or human foolishness. Sometimes both. I watch for an hour before moving. Finally, just after sunrise, a man appears, dragging something behind him on a tarp. He is alone. Late 30s, maybe. Beard, camouflage jacket too big for him. One hand wrapped in dirty cloth. He pulls the tarp into the bowl and dumps the load beside a stump 30 yards from my tree. It is another man, not moving. I cannot tell from where I am whether he is dead in the ordinary sense or the new one. The bearded man stands over him and says, __quote_2__, not angry, not sad, just tired. Then he goes through the dead man's pockets, takes what he wants, and leaves him there. I do not move until noon. The body never rises. Flies find it. Later, one infected drifts in, notices it, and stays there busy with it long enough that I look away. I am not interested in details. The point is simple. Men are settling accounts in these woods now. Maybe the dead one was bad. Maybe the living one was worse. I do not know. What matters is that the bowl is no longer remote in any useful sense. It is part of the map people are making by violence and need. At dusk, I put on gloves, cover my face, and go out with a folding saw and tarp. Leaving a body close to the tree is not an option. Smell, insects, attention, all wrong. I do not have the strength or time to dig deep in this ground. So I work the problem another way. I wrap the body in the tarp the bearded man left, drag it with a line downhill through a rock cut to the old wash channel, and use the spring-fed runoff and gravity to pull it farther than I could carry. It is brutal work, messy in ways I am not going to describe, and it takes most of the evening. By the time I am done, the body is well away from the bowl and wedged in brush near the lower drainage where sooner or later something else will claim it. I scrub my boots in creek water, clean hands with soap until the skin goes raw, and get back inside the tree near midnight. That is the first night I talk out loud just to hear a human voice, even if it is mine. 3 words. Still here? Good. The radio finally gives me one useful thing on day 21. An emergency broadcast from farther west mentions temporary safe intake at a fairground outside a town I know. It also says intake is limited, screening is mandatory, and late arrivals may be redirected. That is not a rescue. That is an overwhelmed holding point dressed in official language. Still, it tells me some structure exists somewhere. The country is not just gone in a week. Pieces remain. Then the battery fades, and the signal drops. I spend the afternoon up in the tree crown line, not literally climbing high, but working the upper inner channel with a mirror and wire to clear vent blockage. Debris has been building there and reducing airflow. While I am doing that, I hear female voices outside. 2 women, one older, one younger. They move carefully, unlike most groups I have seen. The older one carries a walking stick. The younger one has a small pistol on a chest strap and keeps checking rear angles. They stop within view of my slit and read a paper map. The younger woman says the road north is blocked by cars and bodies. The older woman says the west trail might still connect to the ranger cabins. The younger one says cabins mean people. The older one answers that people with roofs beat weather without roofs. They move on before I can decide whether their presence is comfort or warning. What stays with me is not the words, it is the discipline. 2 women moving with quiet purpose through this mess, while half the men I see blunder around, making noise and declaring territory. It reminds me that caution still exists in the world outside bark and root. I need that reminder more than I admit. The next major problem starts with smoke, not camp smoke. Too much, too dirty. I see it late on day 22 coming up through the trees southwest of the bowl. Black at first, then gray. My mind jumps to wildfire, and all the exit calculations slam into place at once. I throw gear into the pack, crack the hatch, and listen. No broad fire sound, no wall of heat. Voices instead. Men. I use the west slit and piece it together. 4 men have set a smoky fire in the ravine campsite where I saw the woman days earlier. They are not cooking. They are burning wet brush to make signal or cover. 2 carry rifles. 1 has a crossbow. 1 is just big and mean-looking and keeps kicking wood into the pile. They have packs, bedrolls, and 2 shopping carts modified with bike wheels. Looters turned forest movers. Worst part, I recognize one. Heavy man from the ranger shed quad. He points uphill while the others argue. I cannot hear every word. I do hear enough. He is telling them there was another camp up here. Might still be, might have food. He wants to sweep the bowl before dark. I pull the hatch shut and sit in the dim space while my own plan splits into ugly options. Run now and risk crossing open ground with 4 armed men below. Stay hidden and trust camouflage against a deliberate search. Wait for dark and hope they camp elsewhere. None are good. I choose preparation. The exit pack goes on. Revolver loaded and wrapped in cloth in my waistband. Hatchet on loop. 1 bottle of water clipped high. I unlash the emergency line I rigged weeks ago and attach it to the inner side of the hatch so I can pull it closed from outside if I have to slip away. Then I open a second route I never really intended to use except in nightmare conditions. A narrow, upward squeeze behind the rear rot channel where the shell flares into a split too tight for comfort. I widened only the dead interior wood there, enough that a desperate man can shoulder through into a pocket behind exposed roots on the uphill side. It is not a real door, more of a violent apology to my future self. I test it once. Barely works. Good enough. Outside, boots approach. 1 man circles low, another stays by the fire. 2 come uphill and stagger. They are not expert trackers, but they are methodical enough to make me respect them. 1 checks under deadfall. 1 pokes into brush with a stick. I hear him laugh about finding squirrels before the week is out. The heavy man tells him to shut up and look for sign of caching. That word freezes me colder than the smoke. Caching. He has done this before. The first man reaches the tree and thumps the trunk with his palm. He says it is hollow. The heavy man tells him a lot of old trees are hollow. Then, after a pause that lasts too long, he says, cut around the base and see if anybody made use of it. I do not wait to hear more. I shoulder into the rear squeeze channel with the pack scraping bark and one boot catching twice. Dry wood digs into my chest and cheek. Something tears on the pack seam. I push anyway. Dirt rains into my collar. Then I am through into the root pocket behind the trunk on the uphill side where ferns and a fallen limb hide the gap from below. I flatten under the roots and listen. The first hatchet blow hits the outer bark on the opposite side, then another. They are not going to chop through that shell quickly, but they do not have to. All they need is curiosity and time. I crawl backward uphill under brush, inch by inch, until I can stand in laurel cover without exposing movement downhill. From there, I circle west with slow, impossible care, while the men keep testing the trunk. One of them finds the old root mat. I hear him yell, "No choice now." I slip to the ravine edge above their smoky fire and pull the hand crank radio from my pack. Battery dead for broadcast, but not entirely. Enough for a burst if I use it right. I switch it on full volume and throw it as hard as I can into the brush on the far side of the ravine. Static erupts, then a fragment of old emergency voice, loud. Every head turns. I am moving before the radio lands. Downhill from the ravine, closer to the creek corridor, several infected have been drifting all afternoon toward smoke and noise. The radio gives them a direction. I hear the first crashing approach while I am already angling back uphill. Men start shouting. One fires, another fires twice. Those shots do the rest. The forest comes alive with converging movement from lower ground. I regain the uphill side of the bowl and look once. The four men are breaking apart. One is trying to pull a cart. One is screaming about the dog trail, nonsense words, pure panic. The heavy man is still near my tree, yanking at the root mat with one hand and aiming downhill with the other. Then something hits him from the side in brush I cannot fully see, and all of them vanish behind moving branches. I do not stay to watch. I crawl into the rear root pocket again, wait, count, listen, gunfire below, then less, then none. When dusk gets thick enough to hide detail, I go back into the tree through the main hatch. The inside is partly exposed. The root mat hangs crooked. The outer moss is torn. One side of the camo frame shows fresh scrape where a blade got under it. They were seconds or minutes from getting inside, depending on how clever the next move would have been. I close the hatch and sit in the near dark, touching the gouged wood with one finger. The tree saved me again. It is also blown, not completely. A stranger passing through tomorrow might miss the damage. A searching man with a dog or a memory will not. Staying after tonight becomes a gamble I no longer respect. I do not sleep. I repair. Piece by piece in darkness with a covered light. Fresh moss from the spare bag I kept exactly for this kind of damage. Cord retightened. Bark scrap repositioned. Mud smeared over a pale scrape. Inner frame checked. Supplies repacked. Exit pack reduced to essentials. Anything non-critical buried at the far cache before dawn. Before first light, I crawl out and make one last silent trip around the bowl. Down by the ravine, I find blood, one snapped rifle sling, the tipped shopping cart, and drag marks going both directions. No bodies visible. Good. I do not want details. Near the tree, I find the heavy man's hatchet. I take it. 100 yards west, I find the radio smashed in brush, beyond repair. That stings more than I expect. It had been my only voice from the outer world. Now the world is whatever I can see through leaves. Back in the bowl, I kneel with my hand on the root flare and accept what the place has become. A first refuge, not the last. I stay one more day because moving tired gets men killed. That whole day I remain hidden and watch. Nobody returns. Once two infected wander through, drawn maybe by old blood, maybe by habit. One circles the tree and scratches the bark where the hatchet marks are. Then both drift downhill. Rain comes late. It softens sign. That helps. At dusk I start leaving, not all at once. That is another stupid move men make when they get attached to equipment. I take the exit pack, one water can, one food roll, the revolver, and the map. The rest I distribute among the far caches, and one buried barrel near the upper ridge that I prepared for exactly this moment. The bunk stays, the shelf stays, the grate stays. The tree does not need to travel with me to remain what it was. Before midnight, I make my final return for the notebook and coffee. Yes, coffee. A man keeps one thing if he can. Inside the tree for the last time, I sit on the narrow bunk and look around with the red-covered light. The walls are scuffed where my shoulders rubbed. The felt strip is stained with mud. The inner posts I pressure fit are still tight. The air still moves softly through the vent. Everything I built did its job. Better than some houses I have worked in. Better than the town did. Better than all the official language in the world. I put my palm against the inside shell and thank the tree out loud. Not because I think it hears, because silence is earned here, and I want to break it once on purpose. Then I crawl out, pull the hatch shut, smooth the moss, brush my own tracks, and walk uphill into black timber with the pack on my back and the old hatchet hanging from my hand. The route I choose follows the upper ridge north toward a line of disused fire observation sites and maintenance cabins I know from contract work. None are guaranteed. All are more exposed than the tree. What they offer is better view, more room, and if luck holds, a chance at finding other careful survivors before bad men settle everything worth keeping. I move slow, stop often, listen more than I walk. Around midnight, I pass the buried barrel cache and leave half my weight there, marking the spot in my head by rock shape and a split chestnut snag. Near dawn, I reach a saddle where the forest opens enough to show me the valley. Smoke hangs over the towns in long gray smears. Roads glint with stalled metal. Sirens are gone. No hum of distant traffic. Just wind and birds, and every so often, one faint human sound carried too far to make sense of. The world has not ended in fire from horizon to horizon. It has ended the way structures usually fail, unevenly, one support after another until normal weight has nowhere safe to rest. I keep moving. Late the next day, I find the first cabin, locked, abandoned, stripped. I do not stay. Too obvious. 2 miles beyond that, I find a pump house with no pump and bad roof. Also no good. Near sunset, I reach an old fire break where somebody has left a sign nailed to a post with carpenter's pencil. Water west, people safe if clean, no kids, no name, no date. I stand there reading it 3 times. Could be a trap. Could be a warning written by hard, practical people. Could be both. The last part tells me more than the rest. No kids means they are limiting burden, not pretending to be saints. That kind of bluntness is ugly. It is also honest. Honest is worth something now. I do not head west immediately. Instead, I climb above the post, make a hidden perch under blowdown, and watch the line of approach until dark. No movement, no voices, just a deer and one infected wandering far below on the break line, turning toward every sound it cannot quite place. At full dark, I drop back, eat cold beans, and think. I think about the woman and boy fleeing through rain, about the lone woman with the bandaged arm I never spoke to, about the two women with the map, about the men with rifles and carts and a dog that almost gave me away, about the bearded man dragging another man like a load he was tired of carrying, about the fact that hiding kept me alive, but only by inches, and only because the world around me had not finished learning to search. I sleep under blowdown with one eye on the west route and wake before light to more quiet than I trust. In the morning, I make one final choice. I go west, but I do not go in open and hopeful. I circle wide, glass the approach with the binoculars, watch for sentries, check for latrine smell, cooking smoke, discipline sign. If it looks wrong, I keep going. If it looks organized and clean, I reveal myself at distance with empty hands and let whatever comes be decided in daylight instead of fear. 3 hours later, I see the place, not a camp exactly. An old grounds shed and maintenance yard near a dry reservoir cut, partly fenced, partly hidden by earth berm. 2 women on watch, one older, one younger with a chest pistol. Same pair from the map. A man repairing wire at the gate. Another man hauling water from a covered tank. No shouting, no swagger, no pointless fire. Everything small and controlled. The younger woman spots me first through binoculars and raises one arm for me to stop where I am. So I stop. She calls out. Clear voice, wants name, wants distance kept, wants to know if I am bitten, fevered, sick, or followed. I answer plain. No jokes, no sudden moves. The older woman studies me for a long time. Then she asks where I have been hiding. I look back toward the forest ridge I came from. There is no reason to tell them exactly, not yet. Good shelter stays secret until trust earns detail. That lesson cost me enough, so I say, in the timber, somewhere quiet, somewhere that worked. The older woman nods once, as if that is all the explanation a person needs. They take me in after screening, not warmly, not coldly, carefully. That is better than welcome from fools. The yard holds 9 people total. 1 hand pump restored from old lines, rain-catch tarps, shelves of canned food, sleeping spaces marked by chalk and discipline instead of ownership talk. It is not comfort, it is structure. Structure is enough. That first night among other human beings, I lie on a cot inside the shed with roof noise over me and people breathing nearby, and I realize something that only the tree could have taught me. Safety is not the same thing as being hidden. Hidden bought me time. Hidden let panic pass the first brutal weeks without taking me with it. Hidden gave me a place to think while other people burned fuel, trust, and blood in every direction. But hidden also narrows the world until a man starts measuring life by hatch seals and ration lines and the angle of one slit in bark. The tree kept me alive long enough to leave it. That is the truth of it. I never tell the whole group where it is. Weeks later, after I have earned a place hauling water, mending fence, and rebuilding a storage lean-to from salvaged lumber, I tell the older woman there is an emergency shelter back in protected woodland. 1 person only. Good for short-term hide if things go bad. She asks if it is stocked. I say not anymore. She asks if it can still save somebody. I tell her yes, if that somebody knows how to stay quiet and leave before quiet runs out. Winter starts edging into the mornings after that. We build small and careful. No giant fires, no loud generator, no easy sign from the road. Once in a while, new people appear at the perimeter. Some go away, some stay after screening. A few do not like rules and move on. One of the women from the first week in the woods never shows. Neither does the boy. I think about that more than I should. It changes nothing. This world is full of missing people now. The hard part is not letting the missing drag the living into useless guilt. Before the first hard freeze, I make one trip back alone. Not because I need anything, because unfinished places pull at me. The forest has settled by then. Leaves down, sight lines longer, fewer insects, more cold. The route to the bowl feels both familiar and wrong. The way a job site feels when you return after a storm and find the structure still standing, but the world around it shifted. I approach from uphill, slow and armed, and stop where I can see the root flare through bare understory. The tree is still there, no fresh human sign, no obvious damage beyond old hatchet marks half-healed under weather and moss. The hatch remains invisible until I kneel right in front of it. I open it one last time and crawl in. The shelter smells of dry wood and old coffee. Dust on the shelf, charcoal bag flat, bunk straps still tight. A mouse got into one forgotten corner and left little black proof of it, otherwise intact, waiting. The inside air feels the same, cool, calm, honest. I sit there for a few minutes in complete stillness and let the place be what it was without trying to turn it into something bigger, not destiny, not miracle. Not fantasy nonsense, a hidden shelter inside a giant ancient tree, built by a carpenter who noticed a useful wrong shape in the woods and kept his mouth shut. It saved my life. Then I leave again. I reseal the hatch, brush away my prints, and walk back toward the reservoir yard before dark. On the way out, I stop once and look over my shoulder through the trunks. The tree is gone already into bark and shadow, exactly how it should be. There are still infected in the forest, still armed men on some roads, still smoke columns in bad weather and rumors in good weather. The world outside has not repaired itself. Maybe it never will in the old way. None of that changes what matters. I am still here. I have work. I have a place to sleep that is not borrowed from panic. I have people nearby who watch angles, count supplies, and tell the truth when it is ugly. That is enough to build on. And when the nights go long and the wind moves through the trees beyond the fence, I sometimes think about the first silence inside that living trunk. The bark all around me. The hatch sealed. The world tearing itself apart outside while I sat in the dark and learned the difference between hiding and surviving. I learned it in wood grain, in moss, in damp earth under my boots, and in all the things I chose not to do. That is how I make it through the outbreak. Not by being fearless, not by being lucky every hour, not by outgunning the world, by finding one impossible place, building it right, staying quiet when noise would have killed me, and leaving it the moment staying became another form of dying.